Hi, we are going to talk about some things that aren't necessarily needs. Well, some of these things you have to have in order to paint. Minis doesn't have to be Warhammer specific. I do a lot of Warhammer because that's what I'm into. It could be for anything. So first things first, you need a desk, obviously. I am a messy painter, as you can see. So not only do I have a desk, I have a self-repair cutting mat. Everything I talk about, specifically brand-wise, will be in the description through Amazon links and those are all affiliate links. So next, after this, I will not link these. You need minis to paint. Your minis of your choice. I just have some minis. This is what I actually worked on yesterday quite a bit. And, I mean, that's obvious. That's the other thing you need. Next thing you need are brushes. Now, a lot of people speak a lot of things about different brands. Let me continue to grab them because I got more than that. And you could be the type that likes your real cheap brushes that you use for 3 months and then they get to the point where they're not very great and such. So, like, I'm talking. Okay. Let me get those off the floor because they don't want to stay on my desk. And we're going to also talk a little bit about dry brushes because those are very different. So you got like these ones, which are like the cheapo ones. And as you can see, I got quite a few of these. They're just simply cheap, not necessarily one-time use. You can get away with using them more than once. But after you use them a handful of times, there's going to be a point where the bristles don't want to work as well, or it's gonna fray out like crazy, like this one's starting to do. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, you can kind of see it there. You see how you got that one hair going? That's fraying outwards. So these ones I would say are the real cheap ones. Yeah, you can get these anywhere on Amazon. Some dollar stores maybe even, but if you're trying, I still wouldn't even say if it's like the first time you got any minis to paint or any paint. I wouldn't necessarily say use these at all. The only time I use these really is when I am putting on technical paints and or anything else that can ruin a paintbrush, because I'd rather ruin these cheap ones than ruin my good ones. Also, use a paintbrush holder. This is a cup that I got from my cousin's wedding. And it does have my name on it. My name's on the channel before, so it's not, oh, we know your name now. This is something I got as a gift for being an usher, so they asked me one day if I use it, and I told them that I use it every day because it holds all my paintbrushes. So let's go ahead, and you obviously don't have to use that. So let's go to the mid-range brushes, which are not these. The mid-range ones, that's a texture tool. Actually, we'll talk about that. That's a cheap one. So these are what I would call mid-range brushes. They're kind of cheap, but they're not. They're a little expensive for what they are. They're trying to be a little bit fancier. I would also include. Actually, I wouldn't, just because those are expensive. So these are my mid-range brushes. I do use these, not as frequently as I use the next set though. So we're going to talk about Citadel Color brushes, which is Games Workshop's brand. I use these often. I use these very often. I need to get new ones because it's time to replace these. I've used these brushes for roughly 8 months. So it's not like I've used them and then, oh, well, that's enough of using those. No, I continue to use these and I want more to get used. They're just expensive. Now we come down to the creme de la creme. These paintbrushes are expensive. They are the Monument Hobbies Pro Series. I'll say they're expensive for paintbrushes. These are $10 a brush. It's $55 online. They're made in Germany, apparently. I did not know that. But I've used these brushes consistently for 8 months and just cleaned them with water. There's not much fraying going on them. Like, unlike you see with the Games Workshop brushes, there's fraying and stuff on this one specifically. You can kind of see it a little bit, But these brushes have held up extremely well, and I'm not the best in the world at taking care of my brushes. I really didn't know what I was doing when I first started. Now I simply just make sure I get all the paint out of them, and this is the only one that has the exception. But this is for like painting eyes and stuff. So that, and we've got some other stuff that we'll talk about here in a minute. So we have our dry brushes. Let's get this one out because it's different. These are pretty cheap dry brushes. They're all super soft. And I really wasn't good at dry brushing until, actually I really didn't know what I was doing dry brushing in general, but I started using these and it's kind of helped quite a lot. These are a lot softer. Some dry brushes can be a little bit more solid, like we'll use this one as an example. This one is way solid compared to this. That bends all the way down, that does not. So that might not be good for my dry brush doing that, but I'm just using examples here. But for dry brushes, I mean, I would highly recommend cheap ones that you can use and they work good. So these were the ones I got. Again, all these will be listed in the description below with $signs. This is a texture tool. This is something GW sends out, and I think you can buy it. I might have bought this. I'm not sure where I got it from, but I used to use it to put on my technical paints that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But now that I've been using some green stuff and doing kit bashing, I have what are clay tools, and I just use these now because they offer a lot better spread and stuff. It's a lot better doing it with this kind of stuff than paintbrushes because you will ruin your paintbrush sometimes with that. So some people do not paint their minis with brushes. Some people prefer markers. And yes, this is for real. I've done it. I've painted an orc with a marker. And this is the whole set that I think they have right now. These are the Army Painter set. I believe AK Paints does their own. So this is kind of a 2-in-1. This is paints and brushes because it's a marker. And obviously you can find these on Amazon, again, in the description. I use these a lot more. So if you're gonna do edge highlighting, that's something I would highly recommend. If you have like a color that looks good and looks good for your edge highlighting, I would highly recommend these for edge highlighting. I personally do not do any edge highlighting on my minis, but I kind of like my own unique little style. Well, it's not necessarily unique, but still, I don't like edge highlighting. It seems like a lot of extra work for not that much reward. So that is really all these are, and they do come with spare tips as well. So if the tips get ruined, you can always just hot swap them out. It's not that hard to do. These things work fantastic. For newer painters, would recommend. For experienced painters, would also recommend, because some of these colors are very good. And the only thing I really wish they would have added would have been a white marker, but they do not have one, sadly. So that's my thoughts on these. Again, I would recommend it to newer painters. Your stuff's gonna look a little bit more cartoonish. I'll make a cut here and I'll go get one. So I'll see you in a second. Okay, I'm back. So this is an orc that I went ahead and painted up with my brushes and everything. He's an orc. It's just a simple orc boy. And this was the one that I did with the markers. Now, there's a lot of color differences and such. The only thing that isn't really that different is the metallics. Those came out just to be about the exact same. I totally missed a spot on this orc. How did I never notice that? See, even I miss spots. But like I said, it looks a little bit more cartoonish, but I've seen some people paint their minis like that. So if you totally like that and that's for you, then that's the way you go about it. But I do like their leather. Their leather scheme looks really good. He's got a hole in his pants, apparently, because I missed a giant spot. What the hell was I thinking when I was painting this? But I did use these all on this mini. And this is kind of just like your little side-by-side comparison between the two. So new people getting into the hobby. Oh, one quick thing about those little markers that I cannot forget to do. When you prime your mini, let's use this as an example. I always prime a lot of my minis black. Some of my minis, like my orcs and other minis, are primed white. And that is due to multiple different reasons. Might as well talk primers now since we're talking about them. Black is for darker colors. Oh, I don't have any of them around. I guess I took them back. Oh, here we go. So this Roll Eater is a good example. He was primed black, but there's a problem with doing that because he has a light. They go pretty red, and that red has to be multiple layers in order to get it on there real good. Now, for instance, doing a Necron, it's mostly metallic, so priming black's perfectly fine. But when you got to do these brighter colors, it can kind of be a little bit of a pain. But I've learned to just deal with it, and I guess I'll show you the halfway done Krieg. This Krieg was primed white, and that's because he's a lot brighter colors. The leather's supposed to look a lot brighter and supposed to stand out a heck of a lot more than it would be on any other thing. So, and not only that, but this is a Death Watch mini, and their armor's black, so it just makes it so I don't have to do as much work. So that's also part of the reason. So let's go ahead and get that guy back out of the way, and the next thing we'll talk about, I suppose, is... Oh, wait a second. I'm going to give you a cool tip from Eyeballs. So, a lot of people are very nervous about painting eyes. This is one of the first faces I painted, and he doesn't have eyeballs. Now, that little brush I showed you that I told you that I paint eyes with, I paint the whites of the eyes with this little brush. It's highly recommended to have a tiny brush, and I would also highly recommend these. These are micro pens, I believe, and they are, let me find the smallest one because that's the one I use for my eyeballs. Nope, I think it's this one. And as you can see, they have just a little dot, and it'll, as soon as you put that on whatever you're gonna paint, let's use my finger for an instance, there'll be a dot behind. You can barely see it. And if, there you go, you can see it a lot better. Let's do it on my fingernail. You can see it instantly puts paint down, or not paint, but ink. If you want to paint really easy eyeballs, that's the way to do it. That was totally a suggestion by one of my chatters when I do live streams. And again, I thank that person so much. I'm not going to say their name because I'm going to keep them private, but I thank that person so much because, oh my God, that's a life changer. They don't even paint anything with eyes as far as I know. They paint a lot of mask stuff, and they said, why don't you try this? And I'm like, oh my God. Okay. Might as well talk about paints now. Now, I use a lot of different paints. I have, let's see if my camera wants to work with me today. I have these, which are paints and shakers, just because I like them a lot more than I like Citadel's little cups. That's OBS. So these are like some of my paints. Obviously, I do some Vallejo paints. I do some Citadel paints. I do Pro Acrylic. There's a rust effect somewhere in here. There it is. This is Dirty Down Rust right here. And let me fix that. And then there are some that are not labeled because I memorized what they are. And so this is a good majority of it, and that does include some of the Vallejo Fantasy Pro line. Oops. And that is it was for skin color, and I haven't really used, actually I have used it for skin color now that I think about it. And then you have what is my painting rack, and this is going to get replaced eventually by more of what was on my desk, because these are flimsy and I've had one of them break out, so I don't want like the whole thing to fall down. And actually you can partially see the Shelf of Fame back in the background, along with a mess of sprues of extra bits. So paint, I wouldn't say I'm loyal to a brand. Okay, I use Vallejo Blue for my Ultramarines, which is actually, is this Ultramarines? I use Vallejo Ultramarine for my Ultramarines. I use sky blue from Pro Acrylic. I gotta do this right-handed because I gotta quit doing stuff with my left hand. Some Citadel stuff I use is usually up on here. I jump around a lot paint to paint. This paint specifically is the leather that I used on my Krieg. That's why his leather is so much different than, for instance, that doesn't have leather on it. For instance, this World Eater. He doesn't have the same kind of leather, and that's because this wasn't on this mini. So this is what I like to call my homemade. It's as HM for homemade, and this is literally just a leather mixture I mixed up. Now, the next time I mix up a batch of this, I'm going to record it because I kind of forgot how I did it, and I'm going to hope that I can figure it out. So wish me luck on that. I've still got a pretty good chunk of that. I'm like 90% sure I remember how to do it, but I would tell you, go with whatever paints you like. And I understand some places, some of these paints might not be available to you. That's perfectly fine. Try any paints. Here's the great thing about minis. You can paint over it. It's highly recommended that you don't just stick to one particular brand, because I used to use, actually I'll show you my first mini. I used to use Vallejo Gold, and as you can see, Vallejo Gold does not work very well. Well, I started using Pro Acrylics Gold, and it works a hell of a lot better than Vallejo. So there's ups and downs on each brand, and it's personal preference more than anything. You're not gonna make the best looking mini in the world when you first start painting, and it's totally understandable. So we've talked paints. Let's talk about what we're putting the paint on. Now, a lot of people would highly recommend just using a paper plate as a dry palette, something like that. I would also recommend that. That's what I started out with. I'm sorry, my camera's not square. That's what I started out with there for a little bit, but you'll run into a problem. If you do like the hobby, you'll run into a problem because it's your first mini and you're painting real slow, that your paint's gonna dry out. That's where people would recommend what is called a wet palette. And this literally was my wet palette from last night when we were working on the Krieg. This paint's still usable. I could totally just grab some of this paint right now. I'd probably have to mix it a little bit, and this paint's totally usable, and it's been sitting for, have we hit, we're a little over 12 hours now. So this makes it so your paint doesn't dry out nearly as fast. It's simply a sponge, a piece of parchment paper, and then your paint. But I'm going to show you how to make one of these real quick for $0, because this actually does cost money, and there's multiple different brands of wet palettes, and I would just recommend making one at home because it's not that hard. Let me go get the stuff, and we're gonna make another cut. Okay, so we have a Tupperware container. Now, this is the best way to describe it, is you have a Tupperware container, because if you really just want to have a cheap wet palette and go through this route instead of buying one, it's totally understandable. Trust me, I understand. This was my first wet palette. You get a piece of paper towel and you fold it up so it'll fit in there, or you try to at least. Or you could be like me and you're just gonna rip it in half because it'll fit if you rip it in half. All right, so that is the first thing you do. The next thing you do, get some water. I got a bottle of water that I usually keep at my desk for my wet palettes. So let's go ahead and just put some water in there. And then we can go ahead and fold, because it'll actually want to stay folded down. So let's get all that done. So now, all you need to make this into a wet palette, like a homemade one, is a piece of parchment paper. Now, I have pre-cut pieces of paper, and that's for the wet palette that I have. So you'd cut a piece of parchment paper to fit to this, make sure it's all pressed down and flush, and bam, you have pretty much a working, well, it is a working wet palette. This will save you time, money, and paint. Most likely it'll save you paint. I cannot highly recommend saving paint more than anything, because especially when your first time, it takes you quite a long time to paint a mini. This is the best way to make sure that your paint's not going to dry out on you, and you don't have to go back and get more, and you'll get used to being able to thin out paints and that kind of stuff. So these are a lot of my recommendations. I know this was a cheap, easy way to do something that some people might not have access to or might not have the money for, especially since I understand that this is a very expensive hobby, and I don't even want to know how much I spent on paints, brushes, that kind of stuff. I know how much I spent on minis in the first year, and it was a lot. I'm very lucky to have the job that I do, to be able to do the hobby that I can also do, and do all this YouTube stuff, because stuff's fun. I do it for fun. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Again, everything that I've talked about, the paint brands, the paintbrush brands, that kind of stuff, if I can find the starter boxes for the Acrylic Pro and the Vallejo sets, I'll put them underneath there. Citadel has their own, I guess I can point you to them. Citadel has their own starter box, and that comes with minis and a brush. That brush is dog shit. Don't buy that Citadel brush. The brush is garbage. But that's my personal opinion. Some people could paint with it. I could not. And yeah, that's really all we're going to talk about today. It was a lot of beginner intro stuff. We're not even going to touch up on airbrushing. You can see my airbrushes over there. We're not even going to touch up on that. And we're not going to talk about my messy desk, because it's always messy. Like I said, if you have questions, comments below. I'll happily answer them. I've read every single comment left on my channel, just because I like doing it. That includes a couple bad ones, but then I usually kill them with kindness, in a sense. So if you also want to see me paint anything, like tonight we're going to work on this. This is as where the video is coming out. We're working on a Death Rider. Hopefully we finish it, because these things are very detailed. And you can catch me working on some Necron. This is Death Watch. I can show you a Death Watch mini that's already been painted. This is the Redemptor Dreadnought with 3D printed bits, I might add, that I do offer to sell. And then we got some, obviously, World Eaters. We just finished Angron. And here's another Krieg. I didn't even know this dude was chilling on my desk. This will be more of the final product of the Krieg miniature that's sitting right there, to a degree. I don't know how you paint it. And then we try to use these Goblin Hobby stamp kits, and they're challenging, to say at the least. So if you want to stop by stream, I usually stream every day. Roughly, for sure, I start streaming before 6:30 almost every single day. And there will be notifications, or I'll put up a post saying if stream's going to start earlier than 6:30. So if you don't have anything for me in the comments below, hopefully you can stop by a stream, and I'll be happy to see you there. We'll see you in the next one, and have a good day, evening, and or night wherever you are. Bye.